The grand hall of the Coalition flagship was filled with light. Golden beams fell from the high ceiling and touched the polished floor like fingers of the sun. Hundreds of soldiers and officers stood in rows, their uniforms perfect, their faces proud. Music played softly from somewhere above. It was a day of celebration. Sergeant Kang Tae-ho stood alone in the center of the hall. He was not a tall man. He was not wide or muscular like some of the alien warriors around him. He was simply human. His black hair was cut short, and his face carried the tired look of a man who had seen too much war. He was 29 years old, but his eyes looked older. 3 days ago, Tae-ho had done something impossible. A colony of 12,000 civilians had been under attack by Vexari raiders. The defense line had fallen. Every soldier had retreated or died. But Tae-ho had stayed. For 72 hours, he had held a narrow pass alone. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had simply fought, again and again, until coalition reinforcements finally arrived. The Vexari had sent 47 warriors to break through that pass. 47 bodies now lay in the dirt of that distant world. Commander Dale stepped forward. He was a tall creature with blue skin and 3 eyes arranged in a triangle on his face. His voice was deep and carried easily through the hall. "Sergeant Kang Tae-ho," the commander said, "the coalition owes you a debt that cannot be measured. 12,000 lives were saved because of your courage, your strength, your refusal to surrender." Tae-ho said nothing. He simply stood there, his hands at his sides, his face showing no emotion. "In our culture," Commander Dale continued, "we have a tradition. When a warrior performs a deed of great honor, he is given a reward, not medals, not money, something more personal." The commander gestured toward the side of the hall. "You may choose one companion from among these servants. She will be yours, to serve you, to comfort you, to honor your victory." A door opened, and 12 females walked into the hall. They moved in a single line, each one more beautiful than the last. There were Valith women with silver skin and hair like flowing water. There were Keth females with soft fur and gentle eyes. There were species Tae-ho had never seen before, each one chosen for her beauty and grace. The crowd murmured with approval. This was a great honor. Many warriors dreamed of such a reward. Tae-ho watched the women take their positions. They stood in a perfect row, their heads held high, their bodies displayed like precious goods in a market. He felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Take your time," Commander Dale said with a smile. "Choose well." Tae-ho began to walk. His boots made soft sounds on the polished floor. The first woman he passed was a Valith named Rena. She was perhaps the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. Her silver skin glowed under the golden lights. Her eyes were like purple gems. She smiled at him, confident that she would be chosen. He walked past her. The crowd grew quiet. Whispers began to spread like small fires. Tae-ho continued down the line. He passed a Keth woman with fur the color of autumn leaves. He passed a slim creature with wings folded against her back. He passed woman after woman, and he did not stop. At the very end of the line, standing apart from the others, was someone different. She was tall, very tall. She stood at least 7 feet, and her body was thick with muscle. Her skin was gray, like stone, and rough to look at. She had 4 arms, 2 large ones and 2 smaller ones folded against her stomach. Her face was broad, her features heavy. By the standards of the galaxy, she was not beautiful. She was not graceful. She was the kind of creature that other species used for hard labor, for lifting and carrying and building. Her name was Sola. She was Corvani. She did not look up as Tae-ho approached. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor. Her 4 hands were pressed together nervously. She had stood in lines like this before. She knew how it always ended. She was always the one left behind. She was always the one nobody wanted. Tae-ho stopped in front of her. The hall went completely silent. Sola felt his presence and her body tensed. She waited for him to laugh. She waited for him to make a joke at her expense. She waited for the cruelty that always came. "Her," Tae-ho said. His voice was calm and clear. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Commander Dale stepped forward, his 3 eyes blinking in confusion. "Sergeant, perhaps you did not understand. You may choose any of these females. This one is. He paused, searching for polite words. She is a labor servant. She is not meant for companionship. I understood, Taeho said. I choose her. The whispers exploded into open conversation. Officers leaned toward each other, talking behind their hands. Soldiers shook their heads in disbelief. Rena, the beautiful Valeth, stared at Taeho with an expression caught between confusion and insult. Sola finally raised her head. Her eyes met Taeho's for the first time. They were yellow, like old gold, and filled with emotions she could not name. Fear, hope, disbelief. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Are you certain? Commander Dale asked one more time. This choice cannot be changed. Taeho did not look away from Sola's eyes. I am certain. The commander made a gesture of acceptance, though his face showed that he thought the human had lost his mind. Then it is done. She belongs to you now. The words hit Sola like a physical blow. She belongs to you now. She had heard those words before, many times. She had belonged to factory owners who worked her until her hands bled. She had belonged to construction crews who treated her like a machine. She had belonged to wealthy families who kept her as a display of their power, a strange creature to show their guests. But something was different this time. The way this human looked at her was different. There was no disgust in his eyes, no pity, no cruelty waiting to emerge. There was only calm recognition, as if he had found something he had been searching for. The ceremony ended quickly after that. The crowd dispersed, still buzzing with gossip about the strange human who had rejected beauty and chosen the heavy one. Rena walked away with her head held high, but her silver hands were clenched into fists. Taeho turned and began to walk toward the exit. He paused and looked back at Sola. Are you coming? He asked simply. Sola realized she had not moved. Her forearms hung at her sides, and her legs felt like they were made of stone. This had to be a trick. This had to be some cruel joke she did not yet understand. But the human just waited. He did not command her. He did not grab her arm and pull her along. He simply waited, as if she had a choice. She took one step, then another. Her heavy feet carried her forward until she stood beside him. What is your name? He asked. Sola, she said. Her voice was deeper than a human woman's voice, rough like gravel. I am Taeho, he said. And then he did something that no one had ever done before. He held out his hand to her. Sola stared at the offered hand. Among humans, she knew, this was a gesture of greeting, a gesture of equals. She had seen humans do it with each other, but no one had ever offered their hand to her. Slowly, carefully, she reached out with one of her large gray hands and took his. His hand was small in her grip, warm, human. Come, he said. Let us find some food. I have not eaten in 3 days. And together, they walked out of the grand hall, leaving behind a room full of staring eyes and unanswered questions. The quarters assigned to Taeho were small but comfortable. There was a bed against one wall, a table with 2 chairs, and a window that looked out into the endless black of space. Stars hung in the darkness like scattered diamonds. Sola stood near the door, her 4 arms pressed close to her body. She made herself as small as possible, which was difficult for someone her size. The ceiling was low for her, and she had to bend her neck slightly to avoid hitting her head. She watched the human move around the room. He took off his military jacket and hung it on a hook. He splashed water on his face from a small basin. He moved slowly, like a man carrying invisible weights on his shoulders. She waited for him to tell her what to do. That was how it always worked. New owners always had instructions. Clean this, carry that, stand here, do not speak unless spoken to. But Taeho just sat down at the table and looked at her. Please, he said, sit down. Sola blinked. The chairs were too small for her. She would break them. Taeho seemed to realize this. He stood up and looked around the room. In the corner, there was a large storage container made of metal. He pushed it toward the table. Will this work? He asked. Sola nodded slowly. She walked over and lowered herself onto the container. It held her weight. She sat across from him, her knees higher than the table, her large hands resting on her thighs. Tae-ho pressed a button on the table, and a small screen appeared. He ordered food from the ship's kitchen. When it arrived, delivered by a small floating robot, there were 2 portions, one for him, one for her. He pushed the second plate toward her. Sola stared at the food. It was good food, meat and vegetables and something sweet on the side. This was not servant food. This was officer food. "I am not hungry," she lied. "You are," Tae-ho said. "I can hear your stomach." Sola felt heat rise to her face. Among her people, the Corvani, such things were shameful. A servant should never show need. A servant should never burden their owner with their hunger or their pain. But Tae-ho simply began to eat. He did not watch her. He did not wait for her to perform some trick. He just ate his food like this was normal, like sharing a meal with a 7-foot gray-skinned laborer was something he did every day. After a long moment, Sola reached for the plate. She ate slowly at first, then faster. She had not eaten real food in days. The servants on this ship were given nutrition paste, a thick gray substance that provided energy but no pleasure. When she finished, she looked up and found Tae-ho watching her with a small smile. "Good?" he asked. She nodded, then quickly looked away. She did not understand this human. She did not understand any of this. The days that followed were strange. Tae-ho did not treat her like a servant. He did not give her orders. He did not make her sleep on the floor or carry his equipment or stand behind him in silence. Instead, he asked her to walk with him through the ship. He asked her to eat meals with him. He asked her questions. "Where are you from?" he asked one day as they walked through a long corridor. Sola was not used to being asked about herself. She had to think before answering. "I am from Corvin Prime," she said. "A mining world. My people dig metals from the deep mountains. Do you miss it?" "Miss it?" Sola thought about her home. She thought about the dark tunnels and the endless work. She thought about her family, who had sold her when she was 12 years old because she was too big, too heavy, too ugly to ever find a mate. "No," she said. "I do not miss it." Tae-ho nodded. He did not push for more. On another day, they sat in an observation room, watching the stars drift past. Sola had never been in an observation room before. Servants were not allowed in such places. But Tae-ho had simply walked in. And no one had stopped him. No one stopped the human hero. "What did you do before this?" Sola asked. It was the first question she had ever asked him. The words felt strange in her mouth. Tae-ho was quiet for a long time. The stars reflected in his dark eyes. "I was a soldier," he said. "Before that, I was a farmer. Before that, I was a boy who thought the universe was fair. And now? Now I know better." Sola did not understand what he meant, but she did not ask. She was learning that this human carried sadness inside him like a stone in his chest. She recognized that weight. She carried her own. Not everyone on the ship was kind. Sola began to notice the looks, the whispers. When she walked through the corridors, crew members would stop talking and stare. Some of them laughed behind their hands. Others simply looked at her with disgust, then looked at Tae-ho with confusion. One day, she heard voices coming from around a corner. She stopped and listened. "Did you see him walking with that thing?" It was a male voice, sharp and cruel. "The human must be broken in the head. Too much combat. Maybe he likes them big and ugly." Another voice, female this time, laughing. "I heard he turned down Rena." "Rena! The most beautiful woman on this ship. For what?" "A gray mountain with 4 arms." More laughter. Sola pressed her back against the wall. Her 4 hands clenched into fists. She had heard words like this her entire life. They should not hurt anymore. But they did. They always did. She turned and walked away before they could see her. That night, she sat in the corner of Tae-ho's quarters while he slept. He had offered her the bed, but she had refused. She did not sleep in beds. She had never slept in a bed in her life. The floor was fine. The floor was what she deserved. She watched him sleep and tried to understand. Why had he chosen her? What did he want? There had to be something. Everyone wanted something. In her experience, kindness was just cruelty wearing a mask, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. But days passed, and the mask never fell. He never touched her in unwanted ways. He never raised his voice. He never looked at her with the disgust she saw in everyone else's eyes. He simply treated her like a person. It was the cruelest kindness she had ever known, because it made her hope. And hope, for someone like Sola, was the most dangerous thing in the universe. One evening, Taeho sat across from her at the small table. He had been quiet all day, lost in thoughts she could not read. "Sola," he said, "can I ask you something?" She nodded. "If you could have anything in the universe, what would you want?" The question hit her like a blow. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She opened it again. No one had ever asked her that. No one had ever cared what she wanted. She was a servant, a tool, a beast of burden. Beasts did not have wants. "I do not know," she finally said. Her voice was barely a whisper. Taeho nodded, as if this answer made perfect sense. "That is okay," he said. "You have time to figure it out." Time. As if time belonged to her. As if her future was something she could shape with her own hands. Sola looked down at those hands. Large. Gray. Rough with calluses from years of labor. Hands that had built walls and carried stones and broken under the weight of other people's expectations. Maybe, she thought, maybe those hands could build something else. But the thought was too fragile to hold. She pushed it away before it could break her. Outside the window, the stars continued their endless dance, cold and beautiful and impossibly far away. The nightmare came, as it always did, in the dark hours of the night. Taeho was no longer on the ship. He was standing in a different place, a place that existed only in memory and pain. The sky above him was brown with dust. The ground beneath his feet was cracked and dry. This was Earth's outer colony, a small world called Haven. Though there had been no haven here for a long time, the Terran famine had come 3 years into the colony's founding. The crops had failed. The supply ships had stopped coming. 20,000 people were slowly starving to death on a forgotten rock at the edge of human space. In the dream, Taeho was 19 years old again. He was thin, his ribs visible through his skin. His clothes hung loose on his body. But he was not the one who was dying. His sister, Park Yuna, lay on a small bed in their tiny shelter. She was 16 years old, but she looked like a child. Her body had wasted away until she was nothing but bones and pale skin. Her eyes, once bright with laughter, had grown dim and distant. She had been sick before the famine began, a disease of the lungs that the colony's doctors could not cure. She needed medicine. She needed good food. She needed things that no longer existed on Haven. Taeho knelt beside her bed, holding her hand. Her fingers were so thin, so cold. "You need to eat," he said, pushing a small bowl toward her. Inside was a thin soup made from dried roots and recycled water. It was not enough. It was never enough. Yuna shook her head weakly. "Give it to someone else. Someone who can work. Someone useful. Do not talk like that. It is true." Her voice was barely a whisper. "The committee said so. I heard them talking outside. They said I am a burden. They said my ration should go to the workers." Taeho felt anger rise in his chest like fire. The rationing committee had been making decisions for weeks now. Deciding who deserved food and who did not. Deciding who was essential and who was expendable. The old, the sick, the disabled. One by one, they were being cut off, left to fade away so that others could survive. "They are wrong," Taeho said. "You are not a burden." Yuna smiled, but there was no happiness in it. "I am heavy, brother. Too heavy for this world to carry." Those words would haunt him for the rest of his life. The dream shifted. Taeho was running through the colony's dusty streets. He had stolen food from the committee's storage. Just a small package of protein bars. Just enough to keep Yuna alive for a few more days. But they had caught him. Strong hands grabbed him from behind. He fell to the ground, the precious food scattering in the dirt. Boots kicked him in the ribs, in the stomach, in the face. He curled into a ball and took the beating in silence. "Thief," someone spat. You would steal from the living for a girl who is already dead. When they were finished, they left him bleeding in the street. He crawled to gather the fallen protein bars. Most were ruined, crushed into the dirt. He saved 2. Just 2. But when he finally made it home, it was too late. Yuna lay still on the bed. Her chest had stopped moving. Her eyes were open but saw nothing. In her hand, she clutched a small piece of paper. Tae-ho took the paper with shaking hands and read his sister's final words. I am sorry for being too heavy. Please do not carry me anymore. Live well, brother. Be kind to those the world forgets. He screamed. He screamed until his voice broke, until his throat bled, until there was nothing left inside him but empty silence. In the present, Tae-ho woke with a gasp. He was back on the ship. The stars hung outside his window. His body was covered in cold sweat, his hands were shaking, and someone was watching him. Sola sat in the corner of the room, her yellow eyes wide with concern. She had been keeping watch, as she did every night. She did not sleep much. She had learned long ago that sleep was when bad things happen to servants. You were calling out, she said softly. A name, Yuna. Tae-ho closed his eyes. He could still see his sister's face. He could still feel her cold fingers in his hand. My sister, he said. The words hurt to speak. Sola was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she rose from her place in the corner. Her heavy footsteps crossed the room. She knelt beside his bed, bringing her face closer to his level. What happened to her? No one had asked him that question in years. He had buried the story so deep inside himself that he thought it might stay there forever. But something about this moment, about the quiet concern in Sola's golden eyes, broke down the walls he had built. He told her everything. He told her about the famine, about the rationing committee and their cold calculations of human worth, about his sister's illness and her gentle heart, about the stealing and the beating and the note she had left behind. When he finished, his face was wet with tears he had not felt falling. Sola listened without interrupting. When he was done, she reached out with one of her large hands and gently touched his shoulder. Her palm was warm and rough, like sun-heated stone. She was wrong, Sola said. What? Your sister. She was wrong. She was not heavy. She was loved. And love is never a burden. Tae-ho looked at her. This creature that the galaxy called ugly. This servant that everyone had thrown away. In this moment, she seemed like the wisest being he had ever met. Why did you choose me? Sola asked suddenly. The question had been building inside her for days. She could not hold it anymore. Tae-ho wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He looked at her. Really looked at her. And she saw something shift in his face. The soldier's mask fell away, and underneath was just a tired, broken man who had lost too much. When I saw you standing there, he said, standing apart from all the others, your head bowed, expecting nothing. I saw her. I saw Yuna. Sola felt something crack inside her chest. The galaxy looks at you and sees weight, Tae-ho continued. They see something heavy, something to be discarded. But I know what it means to carry the heaviest burdens. I know what it costs. I looked at you, and I saw someone who has carried the weight of cruelty and rejection her entire life. And I thought if I could not save my sister, maybe I could save someone like her. Tears were falling down Sola's gray cheeks. She did not remember the last time she had cried. She had thought that part of her had died long ago. You did not choose me out of pity, she whispered. No, Tae-ho said. I chose you because you are strong, the strongest person in that room. Everyone else was too blind to see it. Sola could not speak. Her throat had closed up. Her 4 hands trembled. Tae-ho reached out and took one of her hands in both of his. His fingers were small against her palm, but his grip was firm. I am not your owner, he said. I do not want a servant. I just want you to know that you matter, that you are not too heavy for this universe to hold. Outside, the stars turned slowly in the endless dark. Inside, 2 broken souls sat together in the silence, holding on to each other like survivors of a storm. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Sola felt something warm bloom in her chest. It was small and fragile, like a seed pushing through frozen ground. It was hope. And this time, she did not push it away. The alarm came without warning. One moment, the ship was quiet and peaceful. The next moment, red lights were flashing everywhere and a terrible sound filled the corridors. Sola knew that sound. It was the battle alarm, the signal that meant the ship was under attack. Tae-ho was on his feet before she could move. His soldier's training had never left his body. He grabbed his uniform and his weapon and was running for the door in seconds. "Stay here," he said. "Lock the door." "No." The word came out before Sola could stop it. She stood up, her head brushing the ceiling, her forearms ready. "I am coming with you." Tae-ho looked at her. There was no time to argue. He nodded once and ran. And Sola followed. The corridors were filled with chaos. Crew members were running in every direction. Officers were shouting orders that no one could hear over the alarms. Somewhere in the distance, there was a deep, booming sound, like thunder trapped inside the ship. They were being hit by enemy fire. Tae-ho found a communication panel and pressed his hand against it. "This is Sergeant Kang. Report." A voice crackled through the speaker. It was Commander Dale, and he sounded afraid. "Vexari remnants. A strike force. They came out of nowhere. They have already breached the lower decks. We need all fighters to Section 7. On my way," Tae-ho said. Section 7 was on the other side of the ship. They ran through corridor after corridor, past fires that burned without control, past wounded crew members crying for help. Tae-ho wanted to stop and help them all, but he could not. If the Vexari were not stopped, everyone would die. The Vexari were a species of hunters. They were tall and thin, with too many joints in their arms and legs. Their skin was black like empty space, and their eyes glowed red in the darkness. They had raided Coalition space for centuries, taking slaves and resources and leaving nothing but death behind. They had come for revenge. The colony Tae-ho had saved, the one he had defended alone for 72 hours, had been a Vexari target. They had lost many warriors that day. Now they wanted blood. When Tae-ho and Sola reached Section 7, the battle was already happening. Coalition soldiers had formed a line across the corridor, firing at the advancing Vexari. But there were too many of the enemy. For every one that fell, 2 more took its place. The line was breaking. Tae-ho joined the fight. His rifle barked fire again and again. He was a precise shooter, every bullet finding its target. Sola stood behind him, unsure what to do. She had no weapon. She had never been trained to fight. All her life, she had been trained only to work and to serve and to be silent. Then the wall exploded. The Vexari had found another way in. They had blown through the hull of the ship, opening a hole in the side of the corridor. Air rushed toward the breach. Emergency shields flickered to life, trying to seal the gap, but they were too weak. The vacuum of space was pulling at everything, at everyone. Sola grabbed a metal beam on the wall with 2 of her arms. With her other 2 arms, she caught Tae-ho and 2 coalition soldiers who were being pulled toward the breach. She held them against the terrible pull of space, her muscles screaming with the effort. The emergency shields finally sealed. The pulling stopped. Sola released her grip, and the soldiers fell to the floor, gasping. Tae-ho looked at her with wide eyes. "Thank you." But there was no time for thanks. The Vexari were still coming. The battle moved through the ship like a living thing. Room by room, corridor by corridor, they fought. Sola followed Tae-ho, and slowly she began to find her own way to help. When debris blocked the path, she lifted it aside with her 4 arms. When a door was sealed shut, she pulled it open with her bare hands. When soldiers were wounded and could not walk, she carried them to safety. She was not a fighter, but she was strong, stronger than anyone had ever given her credit for. The worst moment came near the ship's reactor. A Vexari bomb had exploded, bringing down a section of the ceiling. Huge metal beams and broken machinery had fallen, creating a wall of wreckage that blocked the corridor. And on the other side of that wall, people were trapped. Sola could hear them screaming. She could hear the hiss of leaking oxygen. If they did not get out soon, they would suffocate. Tejo dropped his rifle and ran to the wreckage. He began to pull at the twisted metal, trying to clear a path. His hands bled from the sharp edges, but he did not stop. It was not enough. The debris was too heavy. Even with other soldiers helping, they could not move it fast enough. Sola watched the struggle. She watched Tejo's desperate face, his bleeding hands, his refusal to give up. And she thought about everything he had told her. About his sister. About the girl who had been left to die because she was seen as a burden. About the promise he had made to himself to never let it happen again. She stepped forward. "Move," she said. The soldiers looked at her and stepped aside. Sola placed all 4 of her hands against the largest beam. It was massive, made of reinforced steel, heavy enough to crush a normal person. She took a breath and pushed. Her muscles burned. Her joints screamed. The weight was impossible, more than she had ever lifted in her life. But she did not stop. She pushed, and slowly, impossibly, the beam began to move. With a roar of effort, she lifted the beam above her head and threw it aside. It crashed against the wall with a sound like thunder. She attacked the next piece of wreckage, and the next. Her hands were torn and bleeding. Her body was shaking with exhaustion. But she did not stop until the path was clear. Tejo rushed through the opening. On the other side were 5 people, huddled together, gasping for air. Among them was Rena, the beautiful Valith woman who had been so confident that she would be chosen. Tejo pulled them to safety one by one. When the last person was through, he turned back to Sola. She was standing in the middle of the wreckage, her 4 arms hanging at her sides, her gray skin covered in cuts and bruises. She had given everything she had. She had nothing left. Her legs gave out. She began to fall. Tejo caught her. It was strange, this small human holding up her massive body. He should not have been able to support her weight. But somehow, he did. Somehow, he held her and lowered her gently to the ground. "I have you," he said. "I have you." Rena stood nearby, staring at Sola. Her beautiful silver face was covered in dust and tears. She looked at the Corvani woman who had just saved her life, and something in her expression changed. "She saved us," Rena whispered. "That creature saved us." Tejo looked up at her, his eyes hard. "Her name is Sola, and she has been saving people her whole life." No one ever noticed. Rena had no answer to that. The battle ended an hour later. Coalition reinforcements arrived and drove off the remaining Vexari. The ship was damaged but alive. Many had been hurt, but many more had been saved. In the aftermath, as medics rushed through the corridors tending to the wounded, Sola lay on a stretcher. Her body ached in places she did not know she had, but there was a strange feeling in her chest. It was pride. For the first time in her life, she had not been a burden. She had not been useless. She had not been too heavy. She had been exactly heavy enough. Tejo sat beside her, holding her hand in both of his. His face was tired and bloody, but he was smiling. "You were incredible," he said. Sola tried to smile back, but she was too exhausted. Her eyes were closing against her will. "Rest now," Tejo said. "I will be here when you wake up." And for the first time in her life, Sola believed him. 3 days passed after the attack. The ship limped through space toward the nearest coalition station for repairs. The dead were mourned. The wounded were healed. And stories were told. The story of the Corvani servant who had lifted impossible weights spread through the ship like fire. Crew members who had once mocked her now spoke her name with respect. Soldiers who had ignored her now nodded when she passed. The change was small, but it was real. Sola did not know how to feel about it. She lay in the medical bay, her body wrapped in healing bandages. The doctors had been amazed at the damage she had done to herself. Torn muscles, cracked bones, internal bleeding. She had pushed herself far beyond what any Corvani should be able to survive. But she was alive. And for the first time in her life, that fact did not feel like a mistake. Tejo visited her every day. He sat beside her bed and talked to her about small things. The repairs on the ship, the food in the cafeteria, the stars they were passing. He never spoke about the battle or her injuries. He simply kept her company, as if that was the most natural thing in the world. On the third day, Commander Dale came to see her. The tall blue alien stood at the foot of her bed, his 3 eyes studying her with an expression she could not read. He was quiet for a long moment, and Sola felt the old fear rise inside her. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when everything was taken away. But Commander Dale did not speak harsh words. Instead, he bowed his head. "I owe you an apology," he said. Sola blinked. "Sir? When the human chose you, I thought he was foolish. I thought he had made a mistake. I looked at you and saw only what my culture taught me to see. A laborer, a servant, something less than." He paused, and something like shame crossed his face. "I was wrong. You are more than I could have imagined. You saved 12 lives yesterday, including my own cousin. I will not forget that." He bowed again, deeper this time, and walked away. Sola lay there in silence, her heart's beating hard in her chest. In her entire life, no one of rank had ever apologized to her. No one had ever admitted they were wrong about her value. She did not know if she wanted to laugh or cry, so she did neither. She simply stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of a universe that suddenly seemed very different. Later that day, Taeho came as he always did. But this time, he was not alone. Rena walked behind him, her silver skin catching the light. She looked uncomfortable, her beautiful features twisted with emotions Sola could not name. She stopped at the foot of the bed, and for a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she spoke. "I was wrong about you." Sola looked at her. The Valith woman who had been so certain of her own value. The one who had been so insulted when Taeho passed her by. "I thought you were nothing," Rena continued. "I thought the human was broken for choosing you, but you saved my life. You nearly died to save my life. And She stopped, her voice breaking. "I do not understand it. Why would you do that for someone who treated you so badly?" Sola thought about the question. She thought about all the years of cruelty she had faced. All the people who had hurt her with words and fists and cold silence. She thought about how easy it would be to hate them all, to let bitterness consume her like fire consuming dry wood. But that was not who she wanted to be. "Because," Sola said slowly, "someone being cruel to me does not give me permission to be cruel to them. I do not want to carry that weight." Rena stared at her. Tears were running down her silver cheeks, leaving bright trails like tiny rivers. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry." And then she turned and walked away, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Taeho sat down beside Sola's bed. He took her hand in his as he had done so many times before. "That was kind of you," he said. "It was true," Sola replied. "I am tired of carrying anger. It is heavier than any stone I have ever lifted." Taeho smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached his eyes and softened the hard lines of his face. "You are wise," he said. "Wiser than most." Commander Dale came to see Taeho that evening. They stood in the corridor outside the medical bay, and the commander asked the question that everyone had been wondering since the ceremony in the Grand Hall. "Why did you choose her?" Taeho looked through the window at Sola sleeping in her bed. Her gray face was peaceful, her 4 arms resting at her sides. In sleep, she looked younger, softer, like the weight of the world had finally been lifted from her shoulders. "Where I come from," Taeho said, "we have a saying. The ones who carry the heaviest burdens are often the strongest souls." He turned to face the commander. Everyone looked at her and saw weight. They saw something heavy, something undesirable, something to be passed over. But I looked at her and saw someone who has carried the weight of the galaxy's cruelty on her shoulders her entire life. And she never broke. She never became bitter. She never stopped being kind. Commander Dale listened in silence. "I did not choose her because I pitied her," Taeho continued. "I chose her because she is the strongest person I have ever met. She just needed someone to see it." The commander was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, as if something finally made sense. Humans are strange creatures, he said. You see things that others do not. Value things that others ignore. Perhaps that is why you are so dangerous. And so necessary. He walked away, leaving Taeho alone in the corridor. Sola woke the next morning to find Taeho sitting beside her bed. He was holding a small bowl of warm soup, steam rising from its surface. "Good morning," he said. "How do you feel?" Sola considered the question. Her body still ached. Her muscles were still weak. The healing would take many more days, perhaps weeks. But when she searched inside herself, she found something unexpected. "Light," she whispered. "For the first time in my life, I feel light." Taeho smiled. He held out the bowl of soup. "Then eat," he said. "You need your strength. We have a long journey ahead." Sola took the bowl in her two smaller hands. She looked at the soup, then at the human sitting beside her. This strange, quiet man who had walked past beauty and chosen burden, who had looked at her and seen not what she was, but what she could be. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Anywhere," Taeho said. "Everywhere? When the ship is repaired, I am leaving the military. I have fought enough battles for other people's wars. I want to see the universe. The real universe, not just the parts covered in blood." He looked at her, and his eyes were soft. "I would like you to come with me. Not as a servant, not as a reward. Just as a friend, if you want to." Sola felt tears rising in her eyes. She had been asked many things in her life. She had been told where to go, what to do, how to behave. But no one had ever asked her what she wanted. No one had ever given her a choice. "Yes," she said. "I want to." Taeho reached out and took her hand. His fingers were warm against her gray skin. "Then it is settled," he said. "Partners." "Partners," Sola repeated. Outside the window, stars drifted past like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there, a universe waited to be explored. A universe full of wonders and terrors and possibilities beyond counting. And for the first time in her life, Sola was not afraid of what came next. She had spent her whole life being told she was too heavy for the universe to carry. But now she understood the truth. She had never been heavy. She had simply been strong enough to carry everything the universe threw at her. And now, with someone finally standing beside her, she was ready to carry something new. Hope. The small, warm seed in her chest had grown into something larger. Something that could not be crushed or starved or beaten out of her. Something that belonged to her alone. She squeezed Taeho's hand, and he squeezed back. The stars continued their endless dance outside the window, and two souls who had been broken by a cruel universe began the long journey toward healing. Together. The end was not really an end. It was a beginning,